Elon talking about capital allocation. It's like 30 seconds, and then Friedberg, I'd like you to comment on the other side. Let's go.
At a certain point, really what you're doing is capital allocation. So it's not money for personal expenditures. What you're doing is capital allocation. And it does not make sense to take the job of capital allocation away from people who have demonstrated great skill in capital allocation and give it to an entity that has demonstrated very poor skill in capital allocation, which is the government.
Yeah, Friedberg, your thoughts on Elon's?
I've said it in the past.
This was at a Wall Street Journal conference, by the way.
You can think of a government or a nonprofit or a corporation as an organism, as a living organism, and each living organism wants to eat and grow. And there is no such thing as an organism that says over time, I want to shrink and shrivel away and die. So the organizing principle of the people in the government is to do more for their constituents, for their owners, which are what they believe to be the taxpayers or their the folks that elected them to office. The politicians themselves, I would argue, are more actors in the Ouija board of behavior that's going on here. And, less kind of, the mental designer of a system that they're trying to use to infiltrate change in the world individually and conquer and gain individual power. There may be some degree of motivation there, but I think largely it's more about the fact that that organism, that government, wants to grow, wants to spend more, wants to do more over time, not less. And this is true of any business. Every business wants to grow. If you're not growing, you're dying. And every nonprofit, there's no such thing as a nonprofit that says, let's not fundraise and let's spend all our money and then shut down. And so I just think as much as we want to kind of sit here and rationalize a way to better politicians that are going to better serve us, that are going to think smarter, the reality is every government, every, institution of government in the history of humankind has tried to grow. And eventually they cycle back. The United States, like I said last year, maybe kind of going out with a little bit of a whimper, less of a bang. And that's going to, be a function of the devaluation of currency or, having less of a place in the global stage, and so on. But I think Elon's right. He feels, and many people in business feel like they're in competition with the government for capital. And that capital is the only difference is that the government can force that capital, can force that revenue, and no business can. And so they've got an unfair advantage in that stage of playing for capital. And this is where Bitcoin feels to a lot of people like a great equalizer. And I'm not a Bitcoin maximalist or anything, but I think that's where the appeal arises, which is as Jefferson said, every generation needs a revolution. And I think that this is the revolution that folks are looking for, which is how do we get this big monopolistic player off the playing field to let us do what we want to do?
Well, it's so easy. All Biden has to do is what he was elected to. He never had a mandate for this $10 trillion of spending. The guy ran a basement campaign. He was elected to not be Trump. Okay. He was elected to stop the chaos, not to engage this $10 trillion progressive agenda. Elon, I think, made a really good point about the capital allocation there. People think, okay, Elon's got all this money, so he must be enjoying this incredible lifestyle. Look, he's right that once you have that much money, you can't spend it all on personal consumption. You invest it. And so the question is, who's going to make that investment? Who's going to be better at it, Elon or the federal government? We know Elon is better at it. He creates incredible innovations. He's going to put people on Mars. He can do incredible things with that capital.
$1 million
whereas the government
vehicles.
just squanders it. Elon had another really good, I think Elon actually understands economics at a macro level really well. He had a really good, there's an equally good snippet of him on the Rogan show, called The Horn of Plenty. Yeah, The Horn of Plenty. Where he says, look, there's a lot of people out there who think the economy is just like this horn of plenty that produces all these goods, and the goods just magically appear no matter what we do. Okay. And so if some people have more goods than others, it's just because they stole them from the horn of plenty. What he said is, no, this is not the way the economy works. People actually have to make the stuff. If people don't make the stuff, there is no stuff. Okay. The stuff doesn't just magically appear. And the way the stuff gets made is you have people making smart capital allocation decisions and engaging in hard work. And that's what actually produces the stuff. And it's not a zero-sum game. So if you think about like this agenda that we have in Washington, it really flips this on its head. It's doing everything it can to stop the production of the stuff, whether it's the stimmy checks or the COVID lockdowns or
bonus
or
unemployment, extending
or just confiscating the earnings of people so that they can spend it on whatever they want.
Tax,
right,
whatever,
exactly. Yeah. It's actually putting constraints on the production, on the supply of this stuff, and then meanwhile, it's just printing all this money. So then we wonder, where's the inflation come from? Well, obviously, it's coming from printing more money for fewer goods. That's basically the problem with the agenda we have in Washington right now.
The increase in the deficit is just getting stunning. If you look back on the 5 or 6 last presidents, Reagan, 142% increase. He got us up to 1.42 trillion. He had to obviously combat what happened under Jimmy Carter. George H.W. Bush, 36% increase. President Bill Clinton, a 1% decrease. The first time we've had a surplus in a long time. And then Bush the second, 57% increase.
No, the economic results under Bill Clinton were amazing. I've talked about it on the show before.
I was just about to say he's a goat.
Yeah, but I mean, at the time, what was very interesting is politicians actually took this issue of balancing the budget very seriously.
Really seriously.
Deadly seriously, and thinking about how we would pay for things. And now we don't seem to think about who is going to pay for these things.
Yes.
Which is going to screw our children.
Okay, so you have to remember that Bill Clinton was the president who said the era of big government is over. And when he left office, he actually bragged about reducing the federal government's share of the economy from 22% to 18.5%. You would never hear a Democratic president.
It'll never happen again.
You'll never hear a Democratic president. Well, first of all, they wouldn't do it. But second, they wouldn't brag about it. You know, you can't even say something like that.
They would be ashamed at balancing.
Zach, let me ask you, do you think a Republican president would? Because I'm not convinced that any party matters at this point. It feels to me like the incentive structure is such that the individuals who are representing constituents who get them elected and they can pass more dollars back to those constituents drives a systemic model of growth for the government. And therefore, the government is competing as a monopoly on the field for capital.
Yeah,
and
look, I think you got a point.
You thought Trump was going to be this guy, and Trump came in, and he ended up spending more. And I recognize there were extenuating circumstances and so on, but I thought he was going to go in. I thought the premise was blow up the government, cut all this nonsense, and the deficit kind of shot up.